How you doing, guys?
So I saw in one of the videos that you sent me, you use a video, or are you going to set up?
You can record yourself, yeah.
No, I mean use a video. Yeah, No. You use a reference video?
I'm not doing that today. Thank you.
So we have a recording?
I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm not sure what would actually work here.
I don't think I need it. So we're going to ask you please to stay to the side or in the back. The front is reserved for the speakers.
Pursuant to.
I can go get Steve Katz or a DJ. So, is this? I mean, if it is, it's fine. Is this acceptable under rules?
But also, they have like 5 people, so if you don't want to give them an audience, so he doesn't write about our blog tomorrow. So I'd rather not use his content, even a few minutes. So just giving you that choice. Some of us are just going to be outside.
You all right?
Just let me know when you're ready, okay?
What's that?
Let me know when you're ready, and I'll give a brief introduction.
Whatever you want, yeah.
Shame on you. Shame on you.
Okay.
And all 7 of you that showed up. Had to be the
I don't
white
understand
people.
how CUNY allows this. I just don't get it. I don't understand.
There are students that are directly affected by
This is really a
fucking views.
Legal objectivity is a myth.
You still have an opportunity to leave.
And also stop writing.
So thank you guys for coming. I'm here to introduce Professor Josh Blackman from the South Texas College of Law. He's here today to discuss the topic of freedom of speech within the context of university.
I don't understand. I just don't.
Professor Blackman has written numerous articles on numerous constitutional topics, and he's given this speech many times before. And so, Professor Blackman, everyone.
He's filming us, just so everyone's aware, he's filming us. He's filming us.
Well, thank you very much to CUNY for having me. It's a pleasure.
White men and those who support white supremacy.
I'm not white. I'm not white.
Then why
said those who support white supremacy.
Excuse me, I think it was already explained to you that you're not supposed to interrupt the speaker once he starts.
You're not
administration.
All right, listen. Everybody stop. Let me tell you something. The university rules are people get to speak. You may protest. You may protest, but you may not keep anyone from speaking. If you do, I have other things to do. I will be back. Or you can resolve this yourself. Or you can have me resolve it.
Why are you bringing racism into your school? Can you answer that?
Why haven't you provided support for students who are affected by this hate speech?
You hear me.
You're not children. You can't talk to us. Excuse us.
Please don't take the bait. Don't take the bait.
She is threatening.
It's ultimately her choice whether she wants to do something
It's not our choice.
It's totally within her discretion. She's literally making that choice, not us.
So, for those of you who are actually here to hear me speak, I'll try. When I came today, there was a sign or hand around that says oppressors are not welcome here. And it says at the bottom, we reject the idea that his views, my views, merit space on this campus, and reject the myth of legal objectivity. Josh Blackman is not welcome at CUNY Law. Congratulations, you made me feel not welcome, but I'm still going to say what I'd like to say. Thank you, I tried. So, I actually want to start by using the one legal argument you actually made. You said the violence exists in the law, and it's a myth that law is inherently neutral. Okay? And you said there's a myth of legal objectivity. So let me talk about legal objectivity for a few minutes, right? Someone did some excellent opposition research. Whoever did this, I actually applaud you. You found about 7 or 8 bullets on various videos I've given over the years. But I want to make a few points. For example, you wrote that I supported the president's decision to rescind DACA. Now let me tell you something. I actually support the DREAM Act. This might surprise you. I actually think the DREAM Act is a good piece of legislation. And we're a member. Well, let me speak, please. And we're a member of Congress. I would vote for the DREAM Act. My position is that the policy itself was not consistent with the rule of law, which teaches a lesson, right? The lesson is this. You can support something as a matter of policy, but then find that the law doesn't permit it. And then the answer is to change the law.
Fuck the law.
Why don't you support people? Why don't you support
fuck
people?
the law, right? That's a very good thing. You are in law school, right? And it's a bizarre thing to say fuck the law when you're in law
It's not bizarre.
school.
It's not bizarre. Welcome to CUNY.
Well, I've been.
But you chose CUNY, didn't you? Because you knew what would happen if you came here.
Well, if you let me speak, So fuck the law, right? That's a good mantra, fuck the law.
Democracy, look how many of us and how many of them.
You do. And I'm actually very impressed. Let me say this. I'm actually impressed that there's so many of you. You could be anywhere right now, and you chose to come out here and exercise your constitutional rights. You want to exercise your rights, and I'll do the same.
Because they are not acting right.
And I'm here the same. So I'm going to express my views. So let me go down this list you have. You have this little checklist, right? I think DACA.
I don't want to listen to this.
You want to go? Please leave, by all means. I think DACA is a good policy.
I think you're tired.
No, I'm feeling pretty good.
You're lying to yourself.
I think you're a white supremacist.
Okay. Oh, that.
This is really about CUNY law and how you let this happen. And shame on all of you for being here. How could you let that happen?
I don't support this, but I think it's really important.
Shame on this school.
I don't care if I'm supporting others. But I want to ask them a really hard question, which we should all try to ask them very hard questions.
Like the notion of legal objectivity.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
But it's now underlined by the fact that the country and the Constitution was founded upon the basis of white supremacy.
Yeah.
So the whole notion of neutrality is a false notion because it's a false notion.
Let him talk, please.
And I think that's a truism. So I think the idea of legal objectivity, ideally that's what we strive for in the law. But also at the same time, I think it's a false argument to sit up here and say that the law is always objective, because it isn't. Look at all of the incidents of police brutality, mass incarceration, other types of inequities in our criminal justice system. And for you to say, and I read your National Review article actually, and a couple of your pieces, and to make that argument, I think is kind of intellectually, frankly, very lazy, and shows kind of a failure to contend with the real issues. Like I said, I respect the fact that you have a right to speak, and you came here. I do not support anything that you are writing or your politics, but I do respect the fact that I have a dialogue with you and ask you some tough questions, because I think some of your articles are highly objectionable. Like, for instance, saying that Jeff Sessions is bringing a rule of law back to the White House. He's a racist. And he has shown throughout his career to be a racist. So to say to bring back the rule of law, in his world, there wouldn't be a rule of law. In his world, I would be drinking from a separate water fountain. So I would just challenge you to be a little bit more intellectually honest in your commentaries as opposed to just glossing over everything and just saying, oh, everything's gonna be fine, everything's gonna be pie in the sky. So that's the reason why I'm here with you, here to listen to what you have to say, because I think some of what you're saying doesn't show the type of intellectual rigor that I would like in an article. So that's how I would kind of leave it.
Thank you. What's your name, sir?
Lamar.
Lamar, I appreciate that. I'm actually from New York City. I grew up in Staten Island, and my girlfriend's from Queens, so this is very, and so this is actually very very close. I'm actually home for the week. I'm visiting my parents after this. So your question is a good one, right? You see these signs. The Constitution was written by white people who owned slaves, and the actual text itself, right? The Constitution's text itself references other persons. It was a flawed document to start. And I believe firmly that we had two foundings in this country, right? There was the founding in 1787, and we had a second founding in 1868, when you have the ratification of the Reconstruction Amendments. And this might actually surprise you. I think the 14th Amendment is a heck of a lot broader than does the Supreme Court. Let me give you an example. You guys studied in college the civil rights cases? Right. Congress in 1870 passed an act that said in places of public accommodation, you can't discriminate on the basis of skin color. This is before 1964, right? I think that law was constitutional. I think the 14th Amendment, standing on its own, gives Congress the power to eradicate white supremacy in the form of segregation. I believe that firmly. And I think the Supreme Court screwed up the civil rights case. I think they got the case entirely wrong. So I do think our Constitution has the potential to fight racism. It doesn't, though. This may also surprise a lot of protesters. I'm actually fairly libertarian. If I were here talking about police brutality, I'd probably be with you guys. I think that the stop and frisk policy is awful. I think it's unconstitutional. It's a Fourth Amendment violation. I also firmly believe that the way certain policies are affected disproportionately affect minorities. I'm with you. Now let me talk about the Sessions op-ed, the one that you asked me about. I hope to answer your question fully. If DACA was put up for a vote, I think it should be voted on. I've taken the position over the last couple of years that the president did not have the power to implement these policies. When I say rule of law, I'm referring to a specific aspect, enforcement. But one of my protests before we left shouted about human rights. I'm with you. I think the fate that DACA and Dreamer people face is very unfortunate. The law often allows for protection of people, but subject to a democratic vote. And if the votes aren't there, you don't get the change you want. So, look, I hear your question, and I feel it. I get where you're coming from. I don't pretend to defend the entirety of our American history. We had some really dark moments, and I think we still have some dark moments. My writings, though, have focused on a specific aspect in terms of whether these statutes give Congress this power. Does that answer a little bit of your question? Even more. This is a dialogue. If anyone else, please, I want questions.
Josh, you were talking about the rule of law, and I actually don't really know much about your background except for what I found out today. And I want to share first that I'm a gay white Mexican from Houston, so welcome to CUNY.
Thanks.
But I guess you're from New York. So when you say rule of law, now what are you specifically referring to? Because that actually invokes messages of law and order propaganda created by Roger Stone, promoted for Nixon, and brought again for Reagan, and then once again, here we go with Trump. So whenever you're saying that, you're bringing that into an isolated moment in time, but historically, it goes back to the 30s when people were killed based on a certain kind of propaganda. So whenever you say rule of law, it invokes a lot of like reactive emotion. So I would say it would probably be better to choose a different kind of language so that you don't incite that, because then you're also accountable and responsible for using that language that has that weight. Don't you think?
Thank you. So I actually take my definition of rule of law from far before Roger Stone and anyone else. John Adams. He helped draft the Massachusetts Constitution of 1780. And he wrote this very famous phrase, you probably heard of. He said, we need a government of law and not of men. The rule of law, I mean to say, is the law of rules, that there's a set of rules that apply consistently to everyone. And I mean that sincerely. When Congress passes statutes that the president can do X, that means the president can do X, he can't do Y. That's how I define the rule of law. But I'm usually very careful whenever I write about the DACA case to say that I actually support this as a matter of policy. It's a weird spot that I often think stuff I like, for example, marijuana, right? I would favor legalization tomorrow. I think there's no good reason why an herb should be criminalized. But we have a Controlled Substance Act, and if Congress wants to decriminalize it, they can. If the Attorney General wants to delist THC as a controlled substance, he actually, I think, has the power to do that, right? But following these rules is something that I care very deeply about. But there are always competing values. I have students in my class from a wide range of backgrounds. I have from Houston a significant number of students from Hispanic backgrounds, and I always respect their views, and I'm cognizant of where people come from. So I do appreciate, notwithstanding the sign, I hope you think I'm not an oppressor. Maybe you do, I don't know. Yeah, I can do it with a shrug. I can do it with that.
Handed this, so I don't know yet, but
Did you make that sign, or you got it from someone else?
Somebody handed it to me, but I do stand with my colleagues here.
You can stand with them.
State this, I definitely agree with this.
All right, well, I can live with that. All right, thank you. What's your name, by the way?
My name is Gino.
Gino, appreciate it. Thanks so much.
So you've admitted that there is a very dark history of racism in this country.
Present, too, not ended, not even close.
To this day.
Yeah.
What remedial regimes do you support? Do you support affirmative action? And aside from affirmative action, you like to talk about how we are living in a society where whatever the majority wants should be the rule of law, correct? Well, what do you do when the minority's rights are trampled upon, or what type of corrective measures should be in place to protect minorities who need resuscitation because of hundreds of years of oppression?
And what was your name again? Ramin. This might surprise you, but if you go back to the 14th Amendment, right, around the same time there was a law enacted called the Freedmen's Bureau Act. Did you guys study this? This was a law passed in the 1860s that gave specific tangible benefits to the freedmen. By freedmen, the freed slaves. I'm actually an anomalist. I think the 14th Amendment, as originally understood, protects some sort of affirmative action. Exactly what we can debate about the form it takes. But the 14th Amendment was designed to bring the freedmen back into the Republic. So if you look at the history of the 14th Amendment, you'll see that they gave, you heard the expression 40 acres and a mule, right? I mean, you probably heard this in history. Congress gave specific entitlements to people who were subject to slavery and oppression. President Johnson gave a very famous speech at Howard in the 1960s. It was I think it was her commencement address, and he had this analogy. He said, it's like running a race, right? If everyone starts off at the starting line at the same point and they start going, right, it's a fair race. But what if you take one guy and you knock him in the knee, and then you say, okay, now go, right? Or even differently, one guy starts at the starting line, and some other guy starts 15 yards back. Is that a fair race? I'm very sympathetic to those arguments. So if you look at the history of the 14th Amendment, I think those who enacted were far more radical than we anticipate them. And I think they would have actually supported certain race-conscious measures, whatever they happen to be. I also mentioned the Civil Rights Act of 1870. I don't think you would need to wait to the 1960s to get civil rights acts to pass public accommodations. I think you get that in the 1870s. But the Supreme Court, in a series of decisions I think were wrong, you had the Plessy decision, right? You have the civil rights cases. I think those cases were not accurate constructions of the 14th Amendment. So your question is, how do we have federal remedial power? I think we read the 14th Amendment as it was drafted. I think that gets you a lot of the way.
But you're asking for strictly textual arguments, and I'm identifying that basically what you're saying, even at the founding, is that you're likely going to articulate an originalist argument, correct?
I don't know. What's the question?
So you're looking at it into this one-dimensional, dry aspect, when in reality you're also identifying just John Adams, when there are a number of other founders that had different points of view. And whether or not it was drafted the way it was also competing values, like you said. And ultimately it had to come up with some document, right? So on the day it was drafted, it wasn't necessarily perfect. But whenever you say that 1878 could have been, the Supreme Court was essentially the ones responsible for failing to have civil rights. Well, it's in the minds of the individuals with the intent to make sure that the laws apply that way. So it doesn't even matter if it's today. How are you going to clean up the minds of those that have hateful thoughts?
Oh, what a good question. And I think thank you, Gina, right?
Correct.
Gina. So the 4 or 5 you actually are here, and the 50 you left, this is good, right? how many times have you ever actually talked to a textualist and originalist on campus? Have you actually?
I don't really ever want to give any credence to that because I looked into it. I'm writing a paper about it.
Good.
And based on Scalia's first article, The Lesser Evil Originalism, which is a very thin article, there's nothing to support what his statements. And to be honest, based on his own private life, he's coming from a Roman Catholic, anti-heretical background. So he's inserting his own values of the murder of those who are not in accordance to whatever text he's really referring to, that they should be moved out of the way. So he's even necessarily, I'm looking at him as being a heretic to the American Constitution. So I will not give credence to originalism at any point.
Let me give you one place where you might like it, right? You guys have the Confrontation Clause, right? There's a provision in the Constitution. Yeah, criminal law. And it says, exactly, right? You have to confront your accuser. See, they were saying behind me. I can actually look at you face to face, right? For decades, the Supreme Court interpreted the Confrontation Clause very narrowly. It said, well, if, say, a lab tech prepares a report against you, the lab tech doesn't have to go to court because it's reliable. It was actually Scalia who said, no. Confrontation means confrontation. And that's perhaps one instance, not everywhere, but one instance where originalism pushed the law in a progressive direction.
Scalia will always articulate super well. He's a great writer. He's also a theatrical queen. I'm saying this by reading his own comments. I don't really ever want to support him in any sense, like saying, like, oh, he's a cute character, because ultimately his statements were awful, and his position was awful. And he comes from an ancient ideology of people who do not have rights. I do not support him at all. Okay. He does not have any veracity in my life, or in my thoughts.
Okay, fair enough. Another question. Yes, what's your name?
Rebecca.
Rebecca.
So it might seem that unintellectual, closed-minded, when people don't even want to argue with people that have different views. It's more that they feel like they're not arguing with irrationality. If you ask a heroin addict on the street, they'll tell a heroin addict it's disgusting for you. They'll say, well, so is the air pollution. It's causing cancer.
Mm-hmm.
They're irrational. They probably look at it the same way. If you look at a racist person, someone will say the Holocaust didn't happen. They'll say it was impossible to hide that many Jews, kill that many Jews. Where are they going to put all those bodies? They look at it kind of at the same way. No matter how he puts it, it's just irrational. That's how someone, like me and him look at Scalia's views. That's what I mean.
So then, Rebecca, what do you suggest? What's your recommendation?
My recommendation
for the discourse, answering Gino's question, right? Gino put a question, but it was a good question. What's
freedom as long as it doesn't hurt anyone. So rights. So rights as long as absolutely. If what someone is doing isn't hurting somebody else, let them do it. Let them do it.
I can agree.
I don't understand.
I can agree. And again, contrary to the science, I'm actually fairly libertarian. I didn't vote for Donald Trump.
It doesn't hurt anybody.
I did not vote for Donald Trump. Did that surprise you? Even though I'm from Staten Island, I didn't vote for Trump. Let me tell you something else. Gino, I signed a letter called Originalists Against Trump.
That's still giving credence to originalism.
Okay, fine. But I actually opposed Donald Trump. I wrote very critically of him, right? I don't think I'm going to vote for him in 2.5 years. I mean, he's still in office, right? I'm actually fairly libertarian, which is why this protest, this is my first protest, but I've never been protested before. I give about 50 of these lectures a year, and I've been at some pretty progressive campuses, but this is a first for me. So yeah, people are proud. Yeah, in the back, you haven't asked a question yet.
Hi, so
what's your name?
My name is Andrew. So my question has to do with constitutional interpretation theory. But I just wondered how you look at contract law, because I think it's obvious that when you write a contract, you run into ambiguities. Mm-hmm. And we have the same situation of ambiguous language that you find in the Constitution as well. The Second Amendment is a perfect example. A well-regulated militia. It's very unclear whether this is like the first part of a subject and sentence, or as conservative interpretation is that it's just sort of however you would interpret it, probably that it's just sort of a useless like the beginning phrase in the right bear arms is the only relevant part of it. So regardless of what your view on the Second Amendment is, how do you resolve ambiguities by looking just at the textual framework?
Thank you, Andrew. And there's a person ever been asked a question by some holding a sign saying, "Go home, Josh Blackman." So let me tell you something. I am home. I'm from New York, so I'm actually, I'm home. ambiguity in a contract or in the Constitution, right? It exists. And there are different ways of handling this, right? One says if the text of the Constitution is ambiguous, you defer to the democratic process, right? So the democratic process wants to do X, that's what happens. Another provision says if the text is ambiguous, you try to figure out the context in which that provision arose, right? So if you and I make a contract and we leave it ambiguous, there's what's it called, parole evidence. Remember that from contracts, right? Extrinsic, I teach property, right? Extrinsic evidence, and they're different sources, but.
So why don't we just use extrinsic evidence to determine what the Second Amendment means? We can look at like what people were talking about. There was a proposal for a constitutional amendment that would give a blanket right to own guns, and it wasn't passed. Shouldn't we consider it relevant that the founders did not pass that and only passed what we now have as the Second Amendment, which was for over a century interpreted as not giving a right to bear arms? This was historically evidenced by gun control legislation that was passed throughout the American West. Like Tombstone, Arizona had a gun control statute.
Yeah, you see the sign, check your guns here, right? You
Yeah,
see the
exactly.
sign? Yeah, so I know your evidence. Look, I'll admit, and I'll admit to you candidly, there's good arguments on both sides of the Second Amendment, right? If you guys read Heller, majority opinion, D.C. v. Heller, you read the dissent, Stevens. Look, I will say I think there's one approach better than others, but if you want to be precise, the difference between the majority in Heller and the dissent in Heller has to do with methodology. Justice Stevens asked, what did the framers intend, right? Did they intend to give an individual right? Justice Scalia says, what was the meaning of the phrase bear arms? Was it in a militia context or individual context? I'm more of an original meaning guy, right? I don't give credence to it, but I'm more of an original meaning guy, so I go with the Scalia approach. But the Stevens approach actually was trying to be originalist, right? I think what's remarkable about originalism is you had 9 justices fighting about what dead white guys from 200 years ago thought, right? You might think that's all legitimate, guns are bad, we should ban them. Okay, then I'll add one more layer to this, right? 1 second, I promise. Oh, actually, no, Rebecca, and then Andrew. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, if you're really going to go by what the framers and really want to know what they intended, if analogously speaking, doctors used to perform lobotomies to like as a surgical alternative. We're not going by that. Why do you really feel like such an archaic interpretation should be like dealt with the same when even in the medical field where the minds were, based on science, that's not the same. Why is it so important for you to be persistent with that mind, to hold on to that mind frame? But a lobotomy, of course, that's ridiculous. You would agree
So,
with
Rebecca,
that?
let me ask you a question, right? Rebecca, right?
Yes.
Rebecca, I asked this question to my students the first day of class. What gives a judge the power to make a decision? Why does a judge have the power to tell X and Y what to do?
Marbury versus Madison.
Okay, and what gave John Marshall the power to do what he did?
Well, he said it was the Constitution.
And does it say that in the Constitution?
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't. So I think your question, right, it goes to the heart of, I'm sorry, Gino, someone interrupted. Do you have one thing you want to add?
No, I wasn't, no.
But it's a good question, right? Why do people listen to courts? Right? Why do courts actually do what they do? And the basis of the courts, and he cites Marbury, then he cites the Constitution, is a written document, right? If judges aren't being ground to some written document, then they're just making crap up, right? Maybe they're making crap up anyway. The objectivity people before probably would argue that. But when you have a written Constitution, there's a value to adhering to it. And if the Constitution's no good, maybe you need a new one. In fact, I think that this populism, which I think is sweeping, you see these protests and Stoneman and et cetera, pass an amendment, right? Try to use the process to go through it. Or maybe don't pass an amendment. Let me tell you something. Our Constitution's unconstitutional. You guys know this? The Articles of Confederation, which preceded our Constitution, right, said to change this, you need unanimous consent. Our Constitution required only 9 of 13 states to agree. So there's a good argument that our own Constitution, when I'm up here, I got a copy of my pocket, right? I wave it around, right? That the actual Constitution itself is invalid. So maybe we need a new one, right? Maybe we need a new constitutional convention. Maybe our polity is so divided between giving a talk in Houston, right, and giving a talk in CUNY. It's a little bit of a different welcome, indeed. But maybe it's so antiquated. Yeah.
No, you can finish.
No, I'm done. Please.
No, I didn't want to interrupt your thought. I wanted to ask a question more on free speech. Is that okay?
I'm done. Go for it.
Okay. The whole notion of free speech, because that was the topic of what you were coming here to speak about tonight. Personally, myself, I'm pretty far to the left, and I support the First Amendment almost absolutely.
But I think also at the same time, I just want to know what your views are about free speech, because I don't really believe in the fact that you should shut somebody down whose views you disagree with. I think also at the same time it's a two-way street. The people who disagree with you have a valid right to come, stand up in front, and say things and all of that. So that said, don't you think sometimes this whole notion of free speech has descended into an excuse for people just to be baldly racist without it having any kind of nuance to it? Because it's one thing to have you come here as a person to speak about legal issues. As much as I disagree with your politics, it's another thing to have somebody come to a campus for the express purpose of just expressing racist views, or even further, that somebody can just say, you know, I hate Muslims. And people are saying, oh, well, you're racist. Like, oh, no, you're just couching on my right to free speech. But it's just like, it seems like this argument for free speech is also kind of and I use the word again, intellectually lazy to contend with the motivations for people doing this. It's one thing to come into a forum and to have a debate with somebody. It's a whole other thing when somebody comes with the expressed intent to oppress somebody or to come with, so on campuses, what do you think of that kind of debate between having legitimate areas where people can come and speak, and people with opposing views can come and talk to each other, which I think is very important to our society, and also the whole idea of hate speech, which is also free speech, but it given legitimacy. That's what I'm saying with this whole campus free speech argument, is that hate speech, being on a college campus in a lot of ways, is becoming legitimized without having a deeper conversation. Because anytime you talk to somebody, oh, it's free speech, or you're just being politically correct, and it's like, all right, being politically correct, does that mean not being a racist or not or thinking about things? So I'm just curious about, it's the topic of your conversation, I'm really curious about your views on this campus debate and where the lines are between open debate and letting people have a right to have an opportunity to speak and descending into racist, ignorant chaos.
Yeah, can I actually give my talk that I wanted to give? Let me give a little bit of it, okay? And I think his question will actually lend itself well. I marked for it, I'll put those to the side. You have provocateurs, right? Everyone knows what the word provocateur means. Someone who says something to get a reaction out of people. Ann Coulter, right? You guys know the name Milo Yiannopoulos? You know this guy, right? You know these people are, right? I'm not Milo, which is why it was so surprising that they organized this massive opposition to my attendance. So the answer, I think, to your question is, putting a racist speaker on a campus no doubt makes people feel very angry, offended, they're mad at the administration, whatever it happens to be. But I think there's a salutary benefit to having that open forum because you can organize. And actually value comes in organization. And you're probably more committed to your cause because of it. The flip side, I'll get to your question in a second, I promise. The flip side to this, though, is that when you exclude someone, it creates a mystique, right? When you say he can't come to campus, there's probably even people at CUNY who say, well, maybe I should go listen to Milo. Maybe I should go read his blog. Like when your parents tell you, don't touch that, what are you going to do? You're going to touch it, right? When you ban something, you make it more attractive. So look, these guys came here, they shouted me down. I said here, oh, whatever, I did for a few minutes. They left because they don't want to get in trouble. They didn't want character and fitness to get them in trouble. Fine, okay? But they made their point, and I made my point. I'm okay with that, right? You know, whatever, I let them get their steam out, they got it out. But to say that a university can then censor different policies, how do you decide what to censor and what not? Let me give you a very quick example, I'll get your question, right? Let's say I was at the University of Texas, right, in the 1940s. And let's say I wanted to give a paper saying the Constitution protects the right of interracial marriage, that is, a black and white person can marry each other. I would have probably been booted off the campus for giving that topic. Okay, let's say you have a topic in the 70s or the 80s. That, you know what, I think the Constitution protects a right for a man and a man to get married. I would have probably been excluded. And I bet I would have been shouted down, not by people who look like this, a bunch of white guys, right? I probably would have. But because you have this First Amendment, which lets people say things outside the mainstream, you allow these ideas to percolate. So gay marriage is now a constitutional right. The Supreme Court said so, right? But if you didn't allow that initial out of the mainstream thought, you'd never get there. But your question, though, is a little bit smarter. Your question is, but these guys, Milo, they're not talking about ideas, right? They're trying to provoke, right? I think the answer to these sort of speakers is just to ignore them. Let them come on campus, speak to 5 people in the room, protest outside respectfully, show them these bunch of idiots. And let me tell you a personal story. I went to college at Penn State, and Ann Coulter came to Penn State. And I asked her a question. I don't know what the hell the question was. Probably something stupid. And she made this dumb, snide remark. I'm like, what the hell was that? And I stopped buying her books. I said, wow, I thought she was pretty smart, but she's a jerk. So seeing these idiots speak often has the opposite intended effect, that you realize you don't want to hear from them again. But banning them, patiently waiting. Yes, sir.
No, please finish yourself.
No, I got it. I'm done. I got my thought out.
So, what Lamar was asking and what you answered, you seem to be saying that there's no limit, right? In terms of there's no red line. What about neo-Nazis? Let's take it a step beyond Ann Coulter and Milo to Richard Spencer, right? People who are part of organizations that pay tribute to Adolf Hitler, who was an enemy of the United States. The United States went to war with Nazi Germany, right? Do you not believe that there's some point at which that level of incitement and division that they create is so extreme that there needs to be a stop on their speech rights?
You ever hear of Skokie, Illinois?
Yes.
Yeah. So, anybody ever Skokie ever know about to say? So there's a town in Illinois called Skokie. It was a predominantly Jewish town and had a lot of Holocaust survivors living there. And the neo-Nazis wanted to have a parade. They wanted to march down the streets. And the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, defended them, saying that even though they're neo-Nazis, want to march with their swastikas, the entire brigade, down this predominantly Jewish town, they had the right to do this. 30 years ago, this issue divided the ACLU, and I think you're still feeling that today. And there was one wing of the ACLU said, you know what? Today we stop protecting the Nazis, then tomorrow we stop protecting the socialists, and then next day you stop protecting, name your organization. And the other guy said, no, there's a line. There's that red line. I'm on the first ACLU category, where I'll say, you know what? If a Nazi wants to come to town, and I see one of my friends going there, I'll say, you're an idiot, what are you doing? And I'm maybe not going to be your friend anymore, right? But allowing the denial of entry in a public forum, this is a general public forum, right? That, I think, is a problem, bigger problem.
So even if somebody, just to follow up, so even if somebody wants to give a speech about undermining the Constitution of the United States, essentially subverting the U.S. government, that still should be allowed, according to your views.
Well, the example I gave before about gay marriage being supported by the Constitution, so that undermines it, right? We have communist speech in the 1950s. You had a lot of people who remember the Communist Party were called to testify before this, this House Un-American Activities Committee. A lot of people will say communists were subverting the Constitution. I think some of my students probably subvert the Constitution in class, but they get their answers wrong, right? But I don't know what that means, subverting the Constitution. Sir, and then number one, number two, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't.
What's your
name? G.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't agree with Lamar. Is that?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I don't agree with Lamar. Basically, he's arguing that because the founding founders were white, slave-owning racists, that their entire political philosophy is completely wrong because it's rooted in some self-interest in keeping themselves in the upper class or some Marxist bullshit like that.
Well, you don't have to curse. You don't have to curse.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Yeah. I don't agree. I don't think that you can label ideas just because from the source of that idea. That's ridiculous. If I say the sky is gray and I'm a racist, does that mean that the sky is freaking blue? No, because you're not legitimizing whatever the person is. You're legitimizing what the person is saying. So I don't understand why just because somebody is not pro whatever your stance is on racial justice or social justice or gender equality, if you don't stand with you specifically and your group on that issue, then somehow just because you're against that group's mentality or political views, then automatically everything else that they say, including the thing about rule of law, which is a procedural issue, that's completely wrong because of the source of what's being said. A Nazi can say things that are true. I'm sorry. You just can't. He can say, cats are felines and they are mammals. Oh my God. But he's a Nazi. Therefore, that statement is terrible and you should never let it be. What kind of argument is that?
So let me.
I think you're being a cuck.
Okay. Oh, I appreciate that. I thought the protesters left.
I know, but I think you're being a cuck.
A cuck. Okay.
Before I leave, just like when lobotomies were made, we knew more about science. When the Constitution was made, the world was a totally different place.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Appreciate that. All right, you want to ask? You want to talk? Go for it.
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, I actually completely agree with you. I believe in like a very broad notion of free speech. But you should love this, right? I mean.
So the science is no racism, no transphobia, no xenophobia, no ableism, no ageism. Go home, Josh Blackman. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like you know,
I'm good with it.
Go home and you're here. I'm not going to kick you out, but you know, like you're using your speech and I'm using mine. But okay, I want to get back to like one question, if you'll allow me, about contextual interpretation and like extrinsic evidence, because I think you're trying to essentially dodge it. The issue with any document is that we don't have like a telepathic ability to know what the original people who wrote the document were really thinking, or what the text actually means, like in terms of like what their intent was, or what like various ambiguous language means. So I mean I understand, like, you know, on this issue of the Second Amendment there's like this divergence, but I mean, it seems to me like it's just a general issue with textualism. You're always going to need interpretation of ambiguous statements in the Constitution, just like you always need interpretation of ambiguous statements in contracts. And then how you, it sort of defeats itself, because at some point you're going to need some sort of interpretive framework that goes beyond just the text. Otherwise, like the text itself is meaningless, and if we're trying to adhere to the text and don't have an ability to interpret it, then we're not going to be able to actually adhere to the text the way that we should be able to do. And so how do you do this under your framework in a way in which you're not just simply picking and choosing things that you want to interpret? So, you know, interpreting things in a way that might be, you know, classically liberal on economic issues, but, you know, more socially liberal on other things.
Thank you for the question. So my answer is going to be another question, unfortunately. What's the alternative? What's your framework? What do you like?
My framework? Yeah. So I think that like you should have like a very like a rich historical narrative, some sort of like structure of framers' intent from like what you said before, extrinsic evidence that gives us an idea of what exactly the founders were intending to do when they wrote a document, or what, you know, the writers of the contract were intending to do when they write their contract. We have like this accepted body of common law jurisprudence of looking at the history of exchange between parties, and of standards in the industry when analyzing contractual documents. So I mean, I think something similar should probably be done with an acknowledgement that a document such as the Constitution has a very broad statement of principles. Was intended to be just that, a broad statement of principles that would be interpreted over time, as the common law tradition encourages us to do with law, unlike in civil law countries, where you have a very specific legal text that's put down and intended to not change unless the legislature changes it.
So you said something very, very profound. You said it should be interpreted like the common law, right? And we all know the common law is not written down. It's this slow, incremental development of the law over generations. And that's your approach? Is that, I'm trying to summarize what you're getting at?
Yeah, yes. I mean, I think we should look at the Constitution like we would look at other documents in the common law tradition as an evolving document. So, yes, my own interpretation is we should look at extrinsic evidence and the founder's intent, and also look at the document as an evolving document, as we would look at the common law.
Okay. And actually, Professor David Strass at Harvard wrote a book called The Common Law Constitution, where he articulates something very similar to what you're arguing. I'll give a response, which may not make you happy, but I'll give a little bit of a response. If a common law judge issues a ruling that people don't like, what can the legislature do? Right, say that a New York court develops a common law rule that is very unpopular on property, something boring, right?
Of course they can write a law that...
They can amend, they can pass a statute, right? But when you have the Constitution and a court, let's call it the Supreme Court, issues a ruling, common law, that radically changes our republic, how do you change it? How do you overturn a Supreme Court decision?
I mean, it's sort of it's an issue. Of course you have to
No. I mean, the question: how do you overturn a Supreme Court decision? There's a
you have to amend the Constitution.
You have to amend it. So my hesitation with the common law Constitution is, if the courts get it wrong, it's really hard to fix. Whereas with the common law judge, you just pass a statute and can fix it pretty easily. That's my hesitancy.
You can amendment to the Constitution while still looking at a common law Constitution in this framework that I'm looking at. They're not mutually exclusive at all.
I'll tell you what, I would actually be okay with what you said if there was an easy way to reverse the Supreme Court decision. There's a proposal that says if the majority of the states or 3/4 of the states disagree, they can reverse the Supreme Court. I'd actually be amenable to your interpretation if there was an easier way to fix a decision. Other questions? What do you got? Yes, ma'am, what's your name?
I don't necessarily have. I do have a question. So, I heard you speak, and unfortunately, I wasn't here for the entire.
Oh, you missed the beginning. The beginning was the best part.
But I did. Greatness. I have a question about your response, which was, back in the days, you gave a lot of analogies to, like, back in the days, you had when they would propose things such as interracial marriage, it was just far off. It's far, like, people couldn't even conceptualize that. And, when I heard you say that, I was thinking about, well, people were putting out things that were far off in aspiration to see things change. So I want to know, like, when you put out your rhetoric, your words, your ideology, are you trying to move towards those things that you put out?
Oh, what a good question. So this might surprise you. When I speak, I am not trying to persuade anyone. I mean that sincerely. I think people are generally pretty set in their ways, and I didn't come to CUNY here to persuade anyone of anything. My only goal is to show you an idea that you may not have considered before. That's actually my entire, and I think I've succeeded today. I think on that front I've succeeded. Give you something you haven't heard before. And if I can do that much, I think I've done what I want to do. Look, I can go preach to the choir, right? I can go to a Federalist Society event, and I can preach to 100 people, say, yeah, Josh, go Josh, right? Not go home, Josh, just go, Josh, right? But I come here instead to talk to a group of people who are probably to my left, perhaps to my right, as it were, and to give a different perspective. So, would I be happy if in 30 years my students become judges and they become legislators and start enacting legislation close to what I want? Yeah, I'd be happy, but I'm not that ambitious. My ambition is far more mundane, is to let people see a different perspective. And if you come and hear me talk, you get some free food, you get a sandwich, it's nice. But Passover starts tomorrow, it's gonna be rough. But the point is, I don't try to persuade people. I think it's unsuccessful. I've spoken to HCBUs, right? I've gone to crowds that I know they're not gonna agree with me. In fact, I gave the same talk at the Thurgood Marshall School of Texas Southern. There were no protesters there. You guys have your A game on, right? I don't know what you're doing that they're not doing, but I don't mind going to crowds. I go on NPR, right? I go on PBS. I talk to any reporter that'll talk to me to try and give a different perspective, and I'm okay with that. So, am I aspirational? I don't know. Maybe I don't. I think long-term plans usually don't pan out. We can't. It'll get fucked. But I couldn't have known a year and a half ago that Donald Trump would be president. I thought Hillary was going to win, and then my talk would probably be just about the same and different reactions. So I can't predict how my ideas will be taken. I can't. You have a follow-up?
Yeah. So I hear you when you say you can't predict how your ideas will be followed up. And, that's for everyone who says anything, right? And I think that one thing that I am interested in is the rebuttal you also gave after that comment about interracial marriages and things like that. You said that it's really good because it influences people and it organizes people and get people involved. Do you think that you're trying to organize people and get people involved?
Not here. No, I think I probably turned people away. The room emptied out after I started talking.
So why waste your time?
Why waste my time? You know what? I don't think I'm wasting my time. I'm having a conversation with people, and I like talking to people. I'm not trying to persuade any one of you. You guys can go home and go vote for Jill Stein or Bernie Sanders. I don't care, right? Go vote who you want to vote for.
That's an assumption.
Yeah. I even said Jill, right? But you might think, well, maybe that guy Blackman said that maybe the 14th Amendment does support affirmative action, right? To give credence to Federalism. Or maybe Blackman said that maybe there is a way the federal government can police segregation absent Commerce Clause, right? Maybe there are alternate paths. And if you remember nothing else, just I'll be happy. It would not have been a waste of my time. Again, I'm going home for Passover tomorrow. So it's not a waste of my time. I'm taking a fairly short ferry ride tomorrow, and I'll be home.
Josh.
There were several hands. I think Andrew's first, and Lamar, and then Gino.
I actually defer to Gino.
All right, go.
And then I'll wait for Lamar as well.
All right. Well, you guys are quiet. I appreciate that.
Kind of to change the topic, when I was reading on your blog, like some of the titles to some of your, I didn't read, obviously I didn't sit up all night reading all of your articles, I read like a couple, but I actually want to ask you a question as a matter of law, because you wrote a bit about this on Lawfare. What are your views on whether or not Donald Trump has actually violated the emoluments clause?
Oh God, thank you.
And what, because that's, like, from what I understand, it's almost an unlitigated part of the Constitution. So is his operation of his business in general a violation of the emoluments clause? And if it is, what is the actual remedy to
Oh, what a good question. All right, so this is going to take me a couple minutes. I'll get to you guys later. So first of all, I don't know who put this together, this little, you guys seen this pamphlet, right? Someone had to have watched many, many hours of my videos to get this. I mean, they had stuff which I've said years ago, and when you take a 3-second excerpt and put out context, it's really bizarre. But this guy actually read my stuff, which I'm grateful for. So thanks, Lamar. I appreciate that. So there are two emoluments clauses in the Constitution. There's the domestic emoluments clause, and there's the foreign emoluments clause. The domestic emoluments clause prohibits the president from accepting emoluments from any state or the federal government. Okay. The foreign emoluments clause is another provision of the Constitution that prohibits persons who hold office under the United States from accepting gifts from foreign nations. So there are two questions for us, right? What the hell is an emolument, and does the president hold an office under the United States? Believe it or not, people actually thought about the emoluments clause before Trump was elected. It actually was, and I'm one of those people. And I've long been of the mind that the president does not hold such an office. So the position I've argued in various briefs is that the president's not subject to the foreign emoluments clause. He is subject to the domestic clause, right? So what's an emolument? There are two ways that this phrase has been interpreted based on history, right? One phrase is that it refers to anything of value, right? So if the president is getting business profits from, you know, some diplomat saying at Trump Hat Hotel, whatever, that's an emolument. The other interpretation, I think, is a little bit more accurate, concerns a business transaction. So if I hire you, Lamar, to be my consultant, and I'm giving you money, that's an emolument, right? But if I just, go to the deli across the street and buy a bagel, that's not an emolument. Okay. But your second question is such a better one, right? What's the remedy, right? Can you issue an injunction against the president? Can a federal court order the president to divest his business assets? Can you order discovery to look into the president's bank accounts, right? Can you do those things? Those are untested questions. We don't have a precedent of a court ordering an injunction against the president. We just don't have it. So the remedy here is actually more important. The even better question is Trump violating the clause in his official capacity, or is he offending it in his individual capacity? So if it's an official capacity suit, you can sue no problem. But if it's an individual suit, you run into Bivens. You guys know about Bivens, right? Bivens is a way to imply a cause of action. So let's say a cop beats you up, right? And you want to sue for damages, for brutality, right? Okay, if he's a state police officer, that's fine. You have section 1983, it's fine. But if he's a federal, like an FBI agent beats you up, to sue for damages, you need what's called a Bivens action. The courts imply it. Can the courts create a cause of action to allow Trump to be sued for violating these clauses? Completely unlitigated. This is a case where, unfortunately, history is playing a big role, and both sides are looking to various strands of history. There was a federal district court in Manhattan, Judge Daniels, right across the river, who found there was no standing. Yesterday, there was a federal judge in Maryland who held that there was standing, but then didn't quite go all the way and said, I need more briefing. So this issue is being actively litigated. It's a fun issue. I'm not trying to make light of it. I actually think, I say this in my brief, I think Trump's business practices are unsavory. I think he should divest himself. But the question whether the Constitution requires it is very different. Thank you for that. Longer answer you probably wanted.
Thank you for that.
I have to remember who was next. Okay, Gino.
Okay, so I have, obviously you do support the legal system, framework, all the documents. You believe that you give it all veracity, even though you challenge that fundamentally it was flawed, correct?
Generalization, but I'll assume it for this question. Go for it.
Okay, thank you. How do you, as a Jewish person, feel that you are represented in Houston?
I've never once considered that question.
You're from Staten Island, isn't that correct?
I am, yeah.
You said that. So my friend and colleague here, Ken, shared with me some maps, about racial maps in New York City. And I'm not from New York City, obviously. I'm from Pasadena. You're familiar with Pasadena?
Yeah.
Okay, that's actually where I'm really from. I say that I'm from Houston because nobody knows what Pasadena is all about.
I know where Pasadena is.
Okay. Now, if you were to put Houston in a political era based on its current status today, what year would that be?
Oh, I think I know what you're going to say. Probably decades ago, yeah?
Correct. So I would actually like to articulate and argue that you are also one of the oppressed in a place like Houston.
Okay.
Because you're Jewish. And I know firsthand that people in Houston, Jewish people in Houston, are not liked. And they're not welcome in country clubs.
Yeah, I'm sure that's right.
There's also strong segregation in Houston, just like Staten Island. There's pockets of purely white communities. I was raised in Pasadena. My mom, who's Mexican, who was through the politics of Texas, somehow transformed to become a right-wing Trump anti-immigration supporter who I no longer speak with. That's the politics of Texas, how that kind of corrupts a person's mind. She got married to a white man. I got moved to Kingwood. You know Kingwood? Of course, master plan community, largely white community. My first time walking into that high school, I was like, what the hell? 95% white people, I don't know what the hell this is. I didn't even know this existed. So whenever you go back to Texas, knowing that you say that there's not a lot of voice or there's not a lot of opposition, I'll tell you why. Because I'm silenced in Texas. Why did I come to New York? So that I could speak. So I could find solidarity like there is in Texas, but moving something forward towards establishing a better framework of human dignity and rights, which is in the Constitution. Now, if you look at it from the one-dimensional flat document, and I will ask you to distinguish fundamentalism from originalism.
Okay.
When you look at it in that one dimension without looking at it, because I guess Scalia himself got to set the framework, or maybe it was Bork, I don't know who did it, said that you can't go past the margins too far. Well, there's 181,000 documents now online from the founding era that can show all the different thoughts that are going through everybody's mind. So I'm going to say, perhaps maybe with a little bit of doubt though, but probably true, you might be one of the oppressed, but you're as an oppressed Jewish person in Houston and not even know it.
So what you're saying is, in Houston, I'm oppressed, but here I'm the oppressor.
Correct.
Eureka, we have it. Okay. That was pretty good. I appreciate that. I think you did your homework on that question. Very good. Look, I don't know where to start with. So what was the actual question? I lost it.
I wanted to give you a little bit of something to think about. When you go back to Texas, whenever you say, what's going on here? Well, there's a lot of context going on there. Born and raised there. Everybody's silenced. Nobody gets the power to speak. If you're not a white, male, Christian, etc., all that framework.
Do conservatives have the ability to speak here in New York City?
I guess Trump is from here, right?
Well, you know, these people, they're not here anymore. People behind me, they were trying to shout me down and not let me speak, weren't they?
Some of my colleagues are young. They may not understand the process. I do not fault them for that. They just don't like to hear bad messaging out there. And as you said, you're a provocateur. How are you going to use that?
No, I'm not a provocateur. I don't do that at all.
How did this happen? How did all this happen?
I don't know. I wish I knew. I've never. You want to tell us how this happened?
So I don't know all the people who are protesting. I know many of them, but so I think maybe to elucidate some of what people here are feeling, going off of what Gino is saying. Like you said yourself, you know, your reason for coming here was just to try to make people see. Like you were trying to make people see, oh, maybe people here at CUNY are actually oppressive, anti-free speech people who won't let a conservative speak, right?
Oh, you think I came here to get a protest? Is that what your argument is?
I thought that's what you said. That you came here to try to
show a different perspective.
Something that they didn't believe in, right?
Yeah, I wasn't trying to make any commentary on CUNY. I booked this event months ago. Like when, maybe in this fall, I think, months ago. And I only got wind of this only a couple of days ago that people were going to be protesting. I don't consider myself a provocateur in the least. That's never been my intent. I try to write things and speak to as wide audience as I can. And generally, if I get an invitation, I show up.
I don't know if I can't speak as to whether your intention was to be a provocateur or not. As you can tell, I'm a huge believer in free speech, and I think the answer to free speech is more free speech. That's why, I joined all the people who came in here and held signs. but you know, I'm happy to have a conversation with you at the same time.
And what are you going to tell your buddies after this about me when we shut down this event?
I mean, the thing I'm going to tell them about you is, well, you're some like libertarian. There's nothing that we didn't know before. You haven't told us anything we didn't know before, basically. But
I didn't tell you anything.
I think I'm just curious to know whether you have a sense of like what we think, as opposed to like what
you tell me.
Libertarian nexus.
I just want to make one point very clear to everybody that's attending, that Professor Blackman was invited. So the officers of the Federalist Society, just like all groups, can decide who they want to come and speak, and then we send out invitations. I just want to make that very clear, because it's not to think that, I mean, sometimes it may be, not the Federalist Society, but people solicit to come speak. So this is not what happens at the Federalist Society. The officers or students send an invitation out after they had a discussion about what speakers and what are they trying to do. So I just wanted to make that very clear.
Absolutely. Okay, here's my question. I have like 1 or 2 questions.
Okay.
Question 1. So do you have like a sense of there's a perception here that perhaps like libertarians in particular are not intellectually honest, that they're really just, you know, trying to make arguments that benefit people who have a lot of money and like people who, you know, as a lot of people have already expressed, have like elements of privilege already. And I I don't know, do you have like a sense of us that's different than what?
Well, I gotta tell. Look,
first question.
Gino, Lamar, and you guys are doing the right thing. If there is a speaker you don't agree with, ask him tough questions. You guys put some tough questions to me. I'll go and I'll think about this. I promise I will. So, but the same token, I want you to think about what I said. Deal?
And to respond to the question you asked him, I will tell my colleagues, watch the video. I can't comment because it'll just be like a very flat perspective. I don't know what to say. I will probably just say, you know, I can't speak for him specifically. I do ask though that because you came on this campus and you kind of get an idea of what it's like or just the passion behind it, that when you go back as a law professor to Houston, please understand in context that there are many voices silenced and there's going to be a preference for a specific kind of law student there. And although there's supposed to be a diversity of voices, it doesn't really happen. And in the Fifth Circuit, it's not where social justice really happens. Mm-hmm. So take that into account. I don't know how much you're going to be able to say in that environment.
You'd be surprised how liberal the student body is at my school. I'd say it's probably close to 50-50, which might surprise you.
How does it, when you want them to become future judges, how does that not take an effect later?
Most of my students don't agree with me, my friend. Most of my students don't agree with me. I fully accept that. In fact, you know, we have these evaluations at the end of the semester, right? A common remark is, I don't agree with him, but I like him as a professor. And
so
I'm
how
happy
can you
with that.
encourage them to speak up?
I do.
Because that's what's not happening in Texas and not happening in that area of the U.S.
I always encourage my kids to say what they want. I've never once told a student to shut up or to discourage them. I like when they disagree with me. That makes me think they're doing their jobs.
Well, I hope based on the showing here, that you can take this experience back and maybe explain it and say, hey, I want to encourage you as other law students to speak up and say something, because down here, there's a lot of problems that are not being solved and a lot of voices that are being shut down.
Okay. I think that's my hand here and also there. Yes. 1, 2. Yeah.
I just had a question about where your views stand, like when it comes to regulation of businesses, and just.
You want to talk about Lochner?
Sure.
Well, I mean, more precise. What do you mean regulation businesses? Like,
so do you think there should be like more regulation on the antitrust side of businesses?
So I'm going to say here, I don't have any positions in antitrust. I'm a humble constitutional lawyer. I actually don't know much of antitrust. So I know you're not going to like antitrust. I just don't think much about it. Sorry. Yeah. Another question over there?
So
And what's your name, by the way?
Oh, my name's Kirsten.
Kirsten. And what was your name? Sorry. What? Emil, thank you.
So I think this event was titled Free Speech on Campus. So, which I think is happening right now. It's super cool. It's interesting to see a discourse go back and forth, especially between like two very different ends of the spectrum. You know, it's fascinating to see the back and forth happen. So, aside from that, my observations, what do you think of free speech on campus? Do you think there's a special protection that should be given to it? Do you think
do you think discourse should be limited? I know, like, knowing professors, but not being a professor myself yet, obviously, that there's often a struggle between should we raise a sensitive topic, or should we let students choose what kind of discourse, should we shut out some discourse, or should we expose them, but also at the risk of possibly doing harm? Like, I feel like it's like a weight, you know?
Well, look, you're all adults, right? And I think because I respect each one of your opinions, I'm not interrupting and letting you guys speak your minds. I think you can be exposed to an idea on campus and say, man, that guy was an idiot, or, okay, Blackman had some points. I don't like when people start shouting at me when I'm speaking. It makes it very hard to speak when people are shouting over you. It's just not conducive. There are 30 of them and one of me. If they just stood in the back, I don't think I would mind it. That would have been actually a little bit easier. You guys are, if they stood in the back, I'd be fine with that. I don't really care. But the campus has a special place. Let me give you like this, right? You may not think about this, but you're in law school now. You're first year, second year, whatever. This is probably the last time in your lives that you're gonna be able to think about ideas. Because once you graduate and take the bar, you're gonna have to hustle and make a living, right? Maybe not, maybe you'll be a bohemian, whatever, right? But most law students, when they graduate, they gotta hit the grind. And whatever their job is, that's what they focus on. You have a chance now to take professors and classes to challenge your thinking, to come up here and talk to a guy like me from Texas who brings a different perspective, right? Who comes home to New York, as it were. But once you graduate here, you don't get this anymore. You're not going to be talking with say you're a public defender, right? You're not talking with your boss about originalism. You're not going to do it, right? You're not going to have time to talk about Lochner, right? Or whatever the case happens to be. You'll be defending your guys. So, yes, the campus college, the college campus is a special place, and graduate school especially, like an institution like the law school, where you guys will be the next judges. And I mean that. In this room, probably one judge, maybe two judges, three, who knows, right? There'll be people who run for office one day. And I want to make sure that people representing New York, I don't live here, but people representing New York on the bench or on the bar have some well-rounded background. If all you ever hear is one side of the story, and you have a litigant before you, how are you going to relate to them, right? Believe it or not, if you're a judge, sometimes you have to rule in favor of the corporation. Believe it or not, it will happen, right? Sometimes the corporation's right. Being exposed to these ideas will make you a better person. You don't have to accept it. I don't care if you agree with me. It really makes no difference to me. I don't. You have to be exposed to it. Anyone? Not Andrew. All right, go ahead.
So, okay, I do a substantive question.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this is like a great example of free speech in action. So, you know, like this is a very, democratic environment, I'd say, in like our culture at CUNY. So people who want to come out and protest, they protest. Like no one necessarily said that like, oh, you like have to leave. I mean, people would have preferred that you not come, but I mean, people are entitled to prefer that you not come. And so I just don't understand the right-wing trope that like, oh, left-wingers, because they get mad about bad things in the world, they must not like free speech. I understand good, but okay.
If everyone was like you, Andrew, I'd be cool. The problem is what happened behind me, where they were shouting at me. They left after a few minutes.
Everyone's basically like me, and they're not really different than me. They just have like.
How many of them are asking me questions now? How many of them actually stuck around to ask me questions? Just what, 2, 3? None of them want to ask me. That's actually what makes me the most mad. Not one of them asked me a damn question. Not one of them. I was staying 5 inches away from them, and they couldn't ask me a single question. I'm right here.
It has to do with the fact that they just thought you were trolling them. I think that's it.
I'm trolling. I didn't know they were coming until a couple hours ago.
Andrew has a valid point. He has a valid point.
I got a call from security. Security asked me how are you exiting the building? The CUNY security person asked me, do you have an exit plan? What the hell is this? Iraq? Do you have an exit strategy? I never even thought of that, taking Uber. I don't know. They were asking for my security whether I had an exit strategy. I never thought, I'm trolling them. My God, I didn't know this was coming until very recently.
How did the American Revolution happen? Okay, I do have a substantive question.
All right, ask your damn question.
Yeah. my substantive question. So okay, like I read some of your the abstracts of your books on Obamacare.
Yeah.
And so I think I understand the gist of your argument on Obamacare, but I'd just like to know like how you view Obamacare versus like some of Trump's executive action, such as like the proposed border wall. Like, do you think that?
I think the border wall is a dumb idea. You can quote me on that.
Okay, the border wall is a dumb idea.
Thank you.
Substantively, it's a dumb idea, but constitutionally, like, what do you think constitutionally of the Trump border law.
Well, there's an issue of eminent domain, which I can talk about. Private property taken for public use. So if the president wants to seize land, he's got to pay for it. I think as a policy matter, it's idiotic. 50% of the people here who have no lawful status entered lawfully and they overstayed a visa. The border wall will do absolutely nothing to stop people coming in an airplane. It's a myth.
But constitutionally, like let's say the president has no money to build the border wall because Congress won't appropriate money for the border wall. So, for example, I read an article a few days ago that he's considering trying to order the military to build the wall for him. So what do you think about the constitutionality of this? How would you compare that to your previously stated views on Obamacare and executive implementation of Obamacare?
Well, let me tell you this. I actually wrote an article about a year ago called Trump's Constitution of One. And I actually addressed his proposal to make Mexico pay for the wall. Believe it or not, he actually released a white paper explaining how Mexico would pay for the wall. Did you guys see this? So let me walk you through this. It's remarkable. So Trump said, I am going to impose a fee on remissions. Like, Western Union, you can send money through Western Union. He said, I'm going to start collecting fees on people who send money through Western Unions back to Central America and Latin America. I actually wrote an article saying that was insane, that the law doesn't provide that. So unless Congress gives the president the power to take private property, he can't do it. And that is a pretty easy answer to give. What else?
So no.
No wall. No wall. What else? I can ask you guys a question? Yeah, go for it.
I guess surveillance.
What about it?
Constitutionally?
I think the warrant requirement is pretty important. I'm actually with Rand Paul on this. I think the warrant requirement is pretty important, and a lot of the warrantless surveillance is very problematic in the Fourth Amendment. So let me ask you guys a question, right? What did you learn? All right, I've been up here for almost 90 minutes. What did you learn? Yeah, Andrew, go for it, my friend. Most valuable student, right?
You're complimenting me too much. I think like there's a couple nuances, but I mean, like you seem like generally like a libertarian thinker. I don't think anyone's surprised at what you think. Like there's no messianic Damascus moment here at the school about what you think. I would say to answer your question.
Okay. Anyone else want to add anything? Justin, can we finish this?
Yeah.
Anyone else? Thank you.
All right.